Moms demand action is at it again with rhetoric that's so over the top, it's starting to look like they're taking crazy pills. In another desperate attempt to capitalize on the death of children, the radical gun-grabbing Karens over at Moms Demand are using the Saugus High School killing. Here's what they had to say, then we'll break it down.
5 years ago today, 2 students were killed and 3 others were wounded when another student armed with an untraceable ghost gun opened fire in Saugus High School. Schools should be sanctuaries of safety for our children, not where they go to die. We hold the victims, survivors, and all those impacted by the shooting in our hearts as we fight for a future free from gun violence.
If you're unfamiliar with the Saugus High School killing, a 16-year-old Saugus student shot 5 of his fellow students and then himself. 3 students, including the attacker, died. Saugus High School is in Santa Clarita, California, and was a gun-free zone. Now, had those children been protected with sufficient armed security or school staff, they'd still be alive today. But they weren't protected, primarily due to the Gun-Free School Zones Act, which was part of the Crime Control Act that Joe Biden introduced in 1990. It's because of these laws that children are getting killed on school campuses. The demanding moms understand this, yet they still support the deadly policy. Anti-gun groups perpetuate this type of behavior because they refuse to help in the areas of mental health, where their efforts would really be useful. And they're persistent in keeping students and teachers unarmed, unprotected, and helpless in these deadly situations. But they're more than willing to use these deaths to acquire money for their organizations and lobby for more gun laws. In a letter to the editor of the Los Angeles Times, a headline read, "California's restrictive gun laws couldn't stop the Saugus shooting." Now, many would argue that California's restrictive gun laws are what caused the Saugus shooting. A student who experienced the incident at Saugus High School that day researched other school killings and said, "I noticed one thing these shootings had in common. They took place in gun-free zones. As more information emerged about the shooting at my school, I came to the conclusion that an adult at the school with a gun could have helped. I believe there were a few quick moments where the shooter probably could have been stopped." The student's observations have been confirmed by situations like the one that occurred in 1997 at a school in Mississippi, when an assistant principal named Joel Myrick stopped an armed attacker at Pearl High School. An armed 16-year-old had already shot one student, and Myrick quickly presented a gun of his own, and that's all it took to stop the attack. Does Moms Demand Action really need any more information to help them understand that what they're supporting is getting children killed? Moms Demand Action's post also talked about so-called ghost guns. Now, the fact that the anti-gun crowd has created new terminology like ghost gun to talk about the American tradition of building firearms tells you just how sinister they really are. There's no such thing as ghost guns. What we're really talking about are private guns in the hands of American citizens that the government doesn't know about. And that's exactly the way our founding fathers wanted it. They didn't win the Revolutionary War and say, now let's give the king a list of our firearms. And the Second Amendment doesn't say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed as long as all your guns are serialized and registered so the government can track them to your front door. The idea that the anti-gun crowd is trying to normalize the serialization and government registration of firearms shows us exactly how far they've strayed from our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Now, as for the fake compassion that the folks at Moms Demand and anti-gunners in general display for the children whose graves they stand upon to push their twisted ideas, it's all just for show. People like Kamala Harris, who call for removing armed security from schools, have armed security for themselves. Now, these people don't hold anyone in their hearts as they pretend. What they hold is a deep-seated fear of guns and an anger toward gun owners, and they should be called out for their hypocrisy, their attempts at violating our fundamental God-given rights, and for keeping innocent children defenseless and vulnerable. And when they talk about so-called gun violence, what they're really talking about is human violence. The violence we experience in our society comes from a variety of issues, including mental health disorders and lack of criminal prosecution. If the anti-gun lobby really wanted to fix the problem of violence, they would seek solutions for those issues. But they've been pushing their anti-gun narrative for decades. It's clear they have no real intention of actually saving lives. They are, however, committed to making sure that you and your children and your grandchildren will not be able to possess a firearm. Gun Owners of America is committed to preserving our Second Amendment and making sure that people are able to protect themselves, despite the efforts of groups like Moms Demand. We will not tolerate those who live among us and who actively work at violating your right to keep yourself and your family safe. We will always call out those who try to destroy your God-given rights. Thanks for watching Bullet Points. I'm Dan Wass for Gun Owners Foundation. You can find more Second Amendment content and updates at gunowners.com.